Hello, and welcome back to Cozy with Chelsea. I am Chelsea, your host. Today I'm going to be talking about how I manifested my partner because I got married last week and I actually posted something on my socials about how romance books helped me manifest my partner. And somebody commented that they wanted a guide on on how that worked. And there's a lot more to it than just the romance books, but I really wanted to dive in and talk about how I manifested my partner and the mindset shift that led me to true love and how you can do it too. So let's get into it. So I wanted to start with a little bit of information on my own journey and who I was when I was younger and all the work that I put in order to have such a wonderful, beautiful relationship because it was a long path. It was a long journey. When I was younger, I was someone who had very limited self-worth and self-love. I did not feel worthy of love. This is all kind of sad to reflect on, but it's true. It's how I felt. And there were a lot of reasons for that, which I would say a majority of them was the way that I was raised. I often didn't feel loved, or I felt like I had to prove myself in order to feel loved, which, you find out eventually that that is not love. Yeah, but that was kind of how I always felt. I didn't have a lot of self-worth. I did not love myself, perhaps even the opposite at times. And I certainly didn't feel worthy of love. How could I feel worthy of love if I didn't even love myself? Even though I didn't feel worthy of love, I always wanted it, right? I mean, I think it's so human to want love and to want that like true love that feels magical and wonderful and like everything you've ever wanted. So I always wanted that. I did not find it until recently with my husband. I always think of that book, The Perks of Being a Wallflower, and there's the line in there that says, I think it's something like, we accept the love we think we deserve. And that was my story for quite a long time. I did not think I was worthy of a love that felt good, a relationship that was good and healthy. I also modeled patterns that I saw within my family structure. The dating history was not fun, and a lot of lows and a lot of partners that were not worthy of my time, which eventually I came to realize. But I did a lot of work. I did a lot of work on myself. It started when I was about 25, when I really started to dive in deep. And that was because at the time I was in a relationship that was very unhealthy and toxic and abusive. And I knew, I think you always know that something isn't right for you, but it might be the only thing that you've ever seen. Like I said, in my family, I only had certain examples of what a relationship looked like. And I think that it was just something that I was used to. So I knew, though, intuitively, that this was not the right relationship for me. There were several moments where, like, it was not just a red flag. It was like, I don't even know, a red yacht passing me by. It was huge signs, and I could feel it in my body. I knew that something was not right and this was not the right thing for me. But that's what led me to start doing the inner work and understand why I was allowing myself to be in this relationship, and also figure out what was it that I was actually looking for, because that's not what I was looking for. That is not the true love romance that I really wanted. So I started doing a lot of work. I started going to therapy. That's where I started. And that was extremely helpful. It took me a little bit of time to finally leave that relationship, even with therapy, but things take time, especially when you have a lifetime of patterns that you're used to. But I did a lot of work. I went to therapy, and just having someone to talk through it with that is unbiased and can really tell you, that you can have someone to talk it through with and realize why you're doing the things you're doing and what you need to do to get out of that situation. But after the therapy, there was just a lot of introspection and a lot of journaling, a lot of reading books. trying to figure out why I was doing the things I was doing, and started to recognize the patterns that I had of self-sabotage. And that applied to much more than my relationships. It applied to eating, it applied to using substances. There were a lot of things that, and by that I mean alcohol, but there were a lot of things that I was using to kind of self-sabotage in a way, even though maybe I wasn't exactly consciously aware of that. And there was a lot of numbing going on too. So in the beginning, a lot of this was really just recognizing it, recognizing the patterns, recognizing what I was doing to harm myself, and then eventually it was taking action. So, like I said, talk therapy was huge for me in the beginning. Self-forgiveness was also a piece of that. So, the forgiveness was a huge part because I had such shame about certain things that I had done or allowed into my life. And that was a big turning point for me, was forgiving myself for the things, really things I had allowed in my life, and understanding why I did it, forgiving myself, and learning how to move forward in a way that did feel good and healthy for me. I really just had to realize that I was human and I was doing the best that I could at the time with the resources and tools that I had available to me. But self-love too was a part of that. It was like I had to really it was hard. It was hard in the beginning to figure out what it was that I loved about myself. There were a few things I could always go to. One was that I was funny, because I did always feel like I was funny. I felt like that was the one thing I had. But focus on what you can. In the beginning, I would focus on my intelligence, how funny I was. Eventually, I could turn that into, oh, I love the way I look. I love the way that I treat people around me. I love that I've built a community of friends that are really supportive. I love that I have, my emotional intelligence is mature and advanced, and you know what? Probably thanks to a lot that I went through when I was younger. So, you gotta start somewhere. And once you start finding what you love about yourself, you can really keep going. And with the self-love, that really became a daily practice. I think affirmations can be very powerful. I had my own affirmations, and maybe I didn't quite believe them all the time, but I kept saying them until I did believe them, which is the whole point of affirmations, right? And I journal a lot. I talk a lot about journaling. I just had a podcast episode last week about journaling. So that was a huge piece too, because it allowed me to get everything out on paper and process what I was going through, and also identify what I was looking for. And all of this ties into manifesting your partner, because truly, and again, I talk about this in the last episode, you have to learn to love yourself. I mean, I'm not going to say you have to learn to love yourself before you find someone, because I think maybe that is part of the lesson of finding someone. You learn to love yourself through that, or after, or whatever. It's certainly not linear. But for me personally, I did have to have that self-discovery and journey before meeting someone. And a part of that self-love and self-discovery really does involve inner child healing. Like I said before, when I was younger, I felt that I would only be loved if I proved my worth to someone. Because when I performed well or did what was requested of me, I did receive praise. And to me, I equated that to love. And it took me a long time to realize that that is not love. Love is when someone will love you unconditionally, ideally, and you don't have to prove your worth in order to be loved. You can be loved simply as you are. And that was a shift that I had to make before meeting my husband. Now, there were a lot of other tools I used as well. I did a lot of body work, energy healing. I did somatic practices like yoga. I did breath work. I would do EFT tapping, and I still do that to this day. And I would have Reiki performed on me as well. So I really I really pursued all avenues. I think that you need to find what works best for you and what feels safe and comfortable. But a lot of those helped me on my journey as well. So throughout this healing journey, I had a lot of mindset shifts that allowed me to open myself up to manifesting my partner. And I think that these are really pivotal. And this is going to be different for everyone and what exactly it is that is your negative pattern or belief system, because that's going to be different for everyone. We all have different childhoods, different experiences, different ways that we relate to others. I'm just sharing my personal experience, and I'll share a few of the mindset shifts that I did have. Again, that first one was that I don't have to perform to be worthy of love. I am worthy of love just simply as I am. And I started to think about this too with whoever my partner would be, because they would be worthy of love simply as they are too. I think that's something too. Sometimes we can have judgments on what we think we need in others. And for me, I started to just really realize that I wanted my relationship and for me to be in love with someone else, to be real love about that person just as they are, as the way they show up. Because we all grow and change throughout our lives, and there's all different kinds of ways you can perform and feel worthy, and all of, your career is going to change. Your likes and dislikes are going to change. Your hobbies are going to change. Your beliefs are going to change throughout your life. So basing love off of those things is not really a good method if they're going to be constantly changing. I think you have to really look at it as, okay, do I love this person as they are, for who they are, being worthy of love simply by being? And then I started to believe that about myself as well. I also think a huge mindset shift for me was one day I just did not care anymore if I found someone. I've seen this happen with friends too, where you're like you're searching for the person that you want to be with, and nobody's good enough. And it's just another, jerk that you went on a date with that was talking about Bigfoot or whatever all those horrible dating experiences when you're really like searching and trying to find that person. And finally, one day I was like, you know what? I am okay. I'm actually totally fine if I stay single the rest of my life, if I am alone the rest of my life. I have friends I love, I have family I love, and most importantly, I love myself. And that was another mindset shift that I completely detached from the outcome. And I think this is a huge piece of manifestation that we often miss because we get so attached to what we think that outcome will look like. And we can hold on so tight that it's like we can't allow it to flourish and show up in the way that it's meant to show up for you. So that's a huge mindset shift. And to get there, I think I'm not going to say that you have to have all these horrible dating experiences to get to that point. I think that was a part of it for me, but I also think it was really fully loving myself and being totally comfortable with being alone. So yeah, I just knew, I don't know, it was just like one day I'm like, you know what? I'm okay with being alone. I'm not going to settle for something that doesn't feel like the real thing just because I want love or I want a partner. And then bam, someone showed up. It's funny how those things work. Okay. Now this is a unique manifesting method that I honestly don't think I even consciously realized until I could reflect on it. But I am going to say that romance books helped me manifest my partner. So the year before I met my husband, Phil, I read 100 books that year. I had a lot of time to myself. And I read 100 books. They were not all romance, but I'm going to say 80 to 90% of those were romance books. And it's funny because my entire life, I've always been very into self-help, self-discovery. I have tons of books on that. And finally I was like, I'm just going to read something for fun. And my friend told me to read the ACOTAR series, A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. I'm sure plenty of people have heard about it, and some people like it, some people don't. I actually loved her books. Throne of Glass is the best series, but I digress. My point is that it got me onto like a kick of just reading like so many romance books of all different kinds. I would read romantasy, just regular romance, sport romances. I read a bunch of different kinds. But my point here is that I started to believe that the love in these books was actually possible in real life. And I could feel, right? Like when you're reading a book, you can feel what the characters are feeling. And I started to really think about manifesting a partner in that way. Like, I want to feel like this character feels in their relationship and tapping into what it feels like. It felt safe. It felt like they trusted their partner. It felt joyous at times. It felt passionate. All of these feelings, I started to think, you know what? I want a relationship where I feel all of those things, or I want nothing at all. And I remember telling my brother, I remember telling him, you know, I'm reading these books and I want a relationship like they have in these books. And he's like, well, they're romance books, Chelsea, you know, you can. And I was like, nope, I want this or nothing at all. And so that kind of combos, you know, manifestation, which is like feeling into what you want and detaching from it. I really truly was like, okay, I'm going to give an example. One of my favorite romance books is Archer's Voice. I think it's by Mia Sheridan. And if you haven't read the book, I'm not going to really say what it's about because I don't want to spoil it, but it's just a sweet male character, and the main female character had kind of like a traumatic event happen to her. She moves to this small town and they find love, and they both have their own stuff and they work through it. And it was just really beautiful. And I was like, I want that. And then I ended up marrying someone who was like, I always say he's my Archer Hale. But he's just like so sweet and kind and patient. And I knew that I wanted that in a partner. So that might be an unconventional method for manifesting a partner. Yeah, maybe read some romance books and figure out what it is you want, right? Because all those relationships are different. Some of those romantasy books, I don't want that. I don't want the scary vampire guy. Like, I don't want that. I wanted someone kind and patient and sweet and caring. And that's what I got. So be careful which ones you're modeling. But yeah, I don't think any self-help book was as powerful as the romance books that I was reading when it came to manifestation. Okay, so when I was manifesting, there were signs that I was on the right track. So I want to talk about that a little bit as well. So there were, I guess, is this a sign? But there were red flags that I stopped ignoring because my God, did I ignore some red flags in the past. And the ones that really started like appearing to me was people who didn't show up. Okay. So when you're dating, you know right away if they're going to put in the effort or not. And if they are not putting in the effort, goodbye. Goodbye. It is just so simple. If they're not showing the effort from the beginning, what are they going to show 10 years from now? God. You got to really start paying attention to the red signs and listening to your intuition. That was a huge piece for me. I ignored a lot. I could feel it. I could feel my whole body telling me not to be with this person or not to go on this date or whatever that was. Listen to it. Now, it is a little bit different than anxiety. So you have to identify what's anxiety or intuition. To me, intuition just feels kind of like a deep knowing, and I feel it a little bit lower in my body. And anxiety is a little bit higher. And that can be complex, especially if you have a history of trauma or bad experiences. There can be a lot of fear when it comes to dating someone, and that's valid because you don't know the person oftentimes. And it can be a scary experience, but you got to start identifying the difference between intuition and anxiety. But man, if you feel that like deep knowing in your whole body, please listen to it. But yeah, people who didn't show up. So if they did not I mean, there's so many examples of this. I guess what I can do is give you an example of what my husband was like when we first started dating. He picked every date spot. I know that might sound small, but there were people that didn't even offer of where to go or wanted to come over that night at 2 a.m. or whatever. I mean, what's up with that? I mean, okay, it depends what you're looking for. I wasn't looking for that. But he would always pick where to go. And it was really early in the relationship. He made an entire list of all different date ideas. I think there were like 20 date ideas. He sent me a shared note on my phone. And then he's like, okay, moving forward, you can just pick one on here. So it still gave me the freedom to choose what I wanted, but he came up with all of the ideas. There's a lot of examples, but that's one that I can think of. If they're not putting the effort in, because you're putting the effort in too. I was putting effort in too. And that's what a relationship should be. Both parties should be putting the effort in. And if they're not, it just was not worth my time. Okay, another red flag was people who brought me down energetically. This is something that you can really feel. I'm sure even right now you can think of an example of this. I can think of dates I went on that just immediately you feel a lower vibration being around that person. It might just be that they are very negative, but it could also just be that you guys are not vibing correctly. So if you're kind of feeling that like weighed down, heavy, negative feeling, that is a red flag. Don't ignore that one. And then there's also green flags that you start noticing, okay? So don't ignore the red flags, but also notice the green flags. Notice the positive coming into your life and align with that. I already gave an example of the green flag, which was Phil creating that list of dates that I could choose from. But another example, this actually happened. So I work, and so does he, but he would try to fit in a date like whenever he could. And we would do lunch dates where we'd go meet at a park. And there was this one day that his fridge was being fixed. And I thought he was going to cancel on me because he kept telling me the fridge is taking forever. It's taking longer than I thought it would. And I felt a little bit like, he just doesn't want to do this date, the thoughts that you have in your mind. But we did do the date that day and it lasted 10 minutes. We just showed up and basically gave me a sandwich and then I went back home. But again, that was the effort that he was putting in to make sure that he saw me and that we connected, even if it was just for a few minutes. And that was a really big deal for me. He also noticed a lot. He noticed that I liked ranch. He would always make sure I had ranch. It was just, they're small things, but they would all add up. There were just so many things. He always had a new plan for me on our dates. He's like, next time we'll do this. He wanted to cook for me. He wanted to take me to concerts, and he just always showed up for me. So make sure you're looking for the green flags as well. Other green flags that I noticed with Phil was also that he was very open and honest in his communication from the very beginning. There were a few things that he wanted me to know and also that I wanted him to know. For example, I wanted to let him know that I was sober. So from the beginning, it was just very open, honest, mature communication with both parties. His words also aligned with his actions. So this is something that might not be present in other relationships that you have with people. They might say one thing and do another. But with Phil, he was very expressive in his words to me, but it also aligned with his actions. So that was really important to me too. He was also very emotionally available. And he was really kind. He was kind to me, but I noticed that he was kind to everyone around him as well. Kind to people out in public. These are things that you'll start to notice as you go through your experiences. But that was an important one to me to show that not only was he kind to me, but kind to everyone around him. So the reason I bring up the noticing the green flags, I think is very important because when you're manifesting, you're wanting to teach your brain to recognize the positive patterns that you're looking for. Now, this does not mean you need to take what you think is a red flag and pretend like it's a green flag because you're manifesting. My point is that, yes, there's manifesting, there's setting the intention, there's visualizing how you feel, but then there is also taking aligned action and recognizing what it is you're looking for and what you're not looking for, so that you're aligning your actions with the desired outcome that you're manifesting. Now, there are actual techniques to manifest a partner, and I want to get into that as well. So I've mentioned, I think, a few times already in this episode, visualizing. So I think visualizing is key to manifesting. There are different visualization exercises. So I actually wrote down, this is a whole thing. It was in my vows when I married Phil, but I wrote in my journal less than a week before I met Phil, and I was not actively dating at the time. But I wrote in my journal what I was looking for in a partner. And some of that was specific, but it was not about how they looked or anything like that. It was about how I felt with them and the quality of a person that they were. So examples of that I wrote in my journal were, I'm looking for somebody who has their own moral compass. They don't use external resources to know right from wrong, and their compass aligns with mine. Somebody who shows up for me and I show up for them. Somebody who is a family man and loves his family and loves mine, and I love his, and so on and so forth. So really getting into what you want that relationship to look like, but most importantly, feel like. And a piece of that too, like when I was giving those examples, was how was I going to be in this relationship too? I think that's a part that sometimes we forget, is what am I looking for, instead of how am I also showing up in this relationship? Because I want to show up as my best self for my partner too. So when you're manifesting, thinking about how you want that partner to feel, but also how you want to feel in that relationship and what it looks like for both of you together. And the reason I talk about more about how you feel instead of exactly what that relationship looks like or what the person looks like is because with manifestation, there has to be a way to visualize that without having an attachment to the outcome. Because it might show up in a way that you never even know, but it might be exactly what you're looking for. So hone in more on the way that you want to feel in that relationship instead of like exactly what you want it to look like or exactly when you want it to happen. I think that can kind of get the universe confused. And like I said, so a part of that is letting go of timeline expectations. I mean, you're not going to know exactly when you're going to meet your partner. When I wrote that journal entry, I thought it could have been 20 years from now, but it turned out to be 6 days later. So let go of those expectations of timeline. It might show up immediately, it might show up years later, but it will show up when it's right for you and when you're ready for it. And I really think surrender plays a big role in that, because when you're too attached to exactly what you want that outcome to look like, it's going to be hard to find the exact right thing, right? So surrendering to the process and detaching yourself from the outcome. You have to trust the process. Now, this kind of ties in, this is another technique, manifestation technique, and for me, it ties into the romance books because I want to talk about expanders. So when you're manifesting, an expander is an example of what you're looking for. So for me, the romance books, those were my expanders. Those were examples of relationships that I wanted to emulate in my own. So I already gave my number one example, which is Archer Hale, which is just funny because, okay, if you haven't read the book, just like skip 15 seconds. But he can't talk, and there's a reason for that in the book. But my friends always joke about how I want a man who doesn't talk. But that is not what it's about. It's more about his temperament and demeanor and personality and all of that. But that was a really great expander for me. I really think I got my Archer. It could also be like a celebrity. It doesn't have to mean that they're exact. You don't know what their relationship is like, but it's the idea of what you think that relationship is and identifying what it is that you want to feel, that you think you're seeing. So for me, a good example is Ina and Jeffrey, because they just seem so in love. And if you read the book, she really goes into that. And it's a relationship. There are realities that are involved. It's not perfect all the time, but they seem like people who truly care about each other. I also started looking at, my friends around me who were in really good relationships. Because like I said, in my family, there was not one relationship that I wanted to emulate. So I started looking at what I did want to emulate. I had friends who were in really healthy and loving relationships. I had friends who had parents who had been married a very long time and still seemed to genuinely love each other. And I just think expanders are so important when you're manifesting. And this applies to anything. This could apply to changing your career and thinking of someone who changed their career and their life is blossoming and beautiful. Have people that they could be fictitious or real, but have what you're looking for and use them as an expander to help manifest whatever it is that you desire. I actually use a chart to do all of this, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But yeah, using expanders, also take a look at what you've already manifested in your life and really reflect on this, because there might be things that you manifested and you didn't even know that you were consciously doing that. Have you ever said something and then it happened later? Yeah, that's manifesting. You're already doing it. So look at the big stuff and the small stuff. For me, some examples, big things were when I started manifesting, I lived in so many great homes. And that didn't always mean that like they were super large or grand or whatever it was, but it was the perfect home that I was looking for at that time. And I'm still in a perfect home that I was exactly looking for. Actually, the home I'm in right now is exactly looking for. Yeah, think about that. Think about the small things. Think about the $100 you found on the floor. I had the perfect parking space the other day. I just knew I was going to get it. So start to recognize, because if you want to get, you can either be spiritual or scientific or both about manifestation. But really, it's just getting your brain to start recognizing that you can achieve what it is that you want to achieve, and start to notice that. Notice those around you who have what you want, and notice what you've already done in your own life, because that will teach you subconsciously to know that you are able to manifest. And then the last step I have in manifesting is taking aligned action. Okay? Because yes, manifesting is putting out good thoughts into the world, creating a manifestation chart. That's what I do. It's all of these things, but it's also about taking aligned action. I mean, you have to put yourself out there sometimes. I mean, maybe sometimes you don't. Maybe someone will just show up and be the perfect person for you. You never know. That just happened to my friend. But I do believe that you should be taking aligned action when you're manifesting something. So examples of this are dating with intention rather than desperation. For me, I was not going to go on a date with anyone who was showing me those red flags. I was going to wait patiently for the perfect person, and that's what I did. So date with intention, not desperation. Desperation is not going to get you where you need to go. A part of this for me in taking aligned action is self-care. So self-care practices that will help you attract your partner. I talked about this a lot in the beginning, but having love for yourself, taking care of yourself, those are important for you, but it also allows you to show up as your authentic self, as someone who loves themselves when you're out there dating and meeting someone new for the first time. And they're going to feel that energetically too. I talked about not spending time with people who are bringing you down energetically, but have you ever thought about, are you bringing people down energetically? Sometimes some self-reflection is good here. And I'm not saying that you're a bad person or anything. I'm just saying take a look at how you're showing up in these situations. Because a relationship is a two-way, it's a partnership. It's a team deal, okay? We have to both be vibrating at that high frequency that we want for each other. So take care of yourself. I also started to show up differently in social settings. And this applied to going on a date, obviously, but also just anywhere that I was socially. You never know where you might meet someone. But for me, it was very important to show up as myself because performing or pretending to be something is not, I mean, you're not being yourself. So if someone's seeing you perform in a certain way and you're wanting to attract your soulmate, I think your soulmate is going to want to see your authentic self, right? That's what you want. You want someone to love and accept you as you truly are. In order to do that, you have to show up as that version of yourself. For me personally, sobriety was a part of this because I had to show up to everything without imbibing in alcohol. And so I showed up as myself. There was no substance I was using to alter myself or make me feel a little bit more loose. I showed up 100% as me. And I think that was a huge shift for me as well, was I was really showing up in all of my social settings and dates as me. So, just to recap, some common manifestation pitfalls to avoid is just attachment to specific outcomes. Think more about how you want to feel in this relationship and let the outcome come to you. And also forcing connections that don't feel aligned. If it doesn't feel right, it's not right. It's just not. My only advice there would be to decipher between anxiety and intuition if that's a factor for you, because it was for me. But if you have a deep knowing that it's not right, and it doesn't have to be horrible, it's just not right. That's okay. And move on. And really start to recognize what you might be doing to block love. And this might require some introspection because you might not be fully aware of it. It might be deeply embedded in the subconscious. So, some signs of this, just to make you aware, would be consistently attracting emotionally or just unavailable partners. Been there. And also think about, are they mirroring your own emotional unavailability? I think dating is a lot of mirror work, and sometimes maybe you're attracting someone who's emotionally unavailable because you yourself are emotionally unavailable, and that feels safer than actually being vulnerable with someone. Another sign you might be blocking love is, we talked about this, but not listening to your own intuition. And that applies to intuition about the warning signs, but also your intuition about the positive signs. You got to really tap in and listen to yourself. Another sign would be performing to earn love instead of just knowing that you are inherently worthy of love. You do not have to be good enough to be loved. You can be loved simply as you are. So those might be some signs. There are plenty of others. I relate to a lot of that. And I think those signs might mean that there are old patterns that are no longer serving you. Those could be patterns that you learned in your family. They could be ancestral patterns. They could be, I don't know, there's a lot of reasons you might have those. So take a look at your belief systems and what's serving you and what is not serving you anymore. It's okay to let go of something that no longer serves you. So some examples of belief patterns that maybe you want to let go of could be the belief that you have to prove your worth to be loved. An old pattern might be self-sabotage when maybe a relationship starts to feel too good or too real, and you start to self-sabotage or pull away or settling for less than what truly feels like the right thing. Another good example of this is overriding your intuition with anxious thoughts. I had this actually in my current relationship, and I had to really understand what my intuition was telling me versus overriding that with the anxious thoughts. And to do that, I used a lot of journaling. I also talked to friends who understood what that was like. And the longer that the relationship went on and the more I listened to my intuition, I felt safer and more comfortable with my husband. So sometimes you just have to kind of follow that gut feeling and trust, even if you're feeling a little bit anxious. But make sure it feels right. Another one, an old pattern that you can say goodbye to, is associating love with struggle or drama. my God, was this one for me? Because again, it was modeled for me over and over again. There is a time in my life where I said the words, I like for something to be hard, meaning it's worth it if I have to struggle to get it. That is an absolute limiting belief. That does not have to be true. You do not have to struggle to get something, especially love. I mean, think about saying that. Yeah, you don't have to struggle to be loved. To be loved should be just such a joyous, peaceful experience. You do not have to struggle. So, those are techniques, signs of some stuff that you can release, and a few of the mindset shifts that at least helped me manifest my partner. And thank you to romance authors. But I wanted to give also just some daily practices for you to manifest your partner. So, some examples that I have are one, to read books that involve the relationship that you want. I mean, this doesn't even have to necessarily be romance. An example would be Ina Garten's book, Be Ready When the Luck Happens, which is just an autobiography about her life, and it details her relationship with Jeffrey. Read books. It could even be watching shows, watching movies, watching documentaries, and start to observe and identify what it is that's aligning with you in what you're looking for in a partner when you're reading and watching those things. And then look at those around you and see what you want. See people who model what it is and the way that you want to feel in a relationship. I always recommend journaling for literally anything, but definitely for manifesting. I would say that was, I wrote down everything that I wanted in a partner and I got it like to a T. It really is crazy how well that worked, and it worked in 6 days. So can't recommend it enough. Focus on what you want to feel. I think this is huge with manifesting, and detach from the specifics of the outcome. Now, I also have a recommendation to make a chart. Okay. So I like to use Lucid Chart. You could do this on paper. You could do it anywhere. I don't know. And this might sound fun to you or not, but I create a chart. Maybe I'll make an example of this and put it out. But I have different sections on the chart. Okay. I'm actually going to pull it up and look at it. So I have like a manifestation chart template. And I start with the middle being a picture of me, or it depends on what exactly I'm manifesting. But I like to have a lot of visuals when I'm manifesting, but having a picture there. And then I have a sentence right below that picture, which is almost like scripting. So I'll give an example. Let me give an example of a partner. So I am so grateful to be so in love with my partner. I feel so calm and at ease and passionate about the love that I'm experiencing. I am so proud of myself for being able to show up authentically as me and having my partner show up authentically as themselves, for us to have such a healthy, loving relationship. So something like that. And then I have different sections of the board. So I have a section where I list what I've already manifested, and I just put examples in there. I'll include a picture if I have one that's relevant. And then I will also have my expanders. So for this example, I can put Archer Hale, a fan pic of Archer Hale, or I can put a picture of Ina and Jeffrey. So those are just some examples. And then I like to break it down into 3 categories. So one of them is things I see. So this is the visualization practice. So when manifesting a partner, write down things that you see. So that could be like, I see us holding hands, going on long walks together. I see us traveling and connecting with each other, whatever it is that's important to you. So one section is things I see. One section is things we have, or things I have. So for a partner, it could be like, I have a loving, caring, and empathetic partner. I have a relationship that feels like home. Anything like that. And then the most important one is ways I feel in this relationship, for this example. So I feel grounded. I feel joy. I feel calm. I feel loved. I feel cared for. I feel excited. Whatever those feelings are that you want to have, I would really, really, really focus on that part of the manifestation. So that's just how I do it. I like to have the chart and I like to put as much visuals as possible because it just, I think, makes it stickier for me. But you could do this just by thinking about it, writing it down. There are a lot of different ways to do that. Oh, and the last one that I have is vision boarding. So I have a vision board. It's just for my whole life. I will always update it around New Year's as a New Year ritual, but I'll also update it throughout the year as I want to. Sometimes lately, actually, I've been feeling I'm like, I need to switch something up here. But a vision board is just so interesting. If you have one, you might understand. But when I was finally ready, like actually truly ready for a relationship, because for a long time I knew I wasn't ready. And once I finally felt ready, I put something up on there. And same thing, within a few weeks, I had a boyfriend. And another weird thing about the vision board is I cut out a picture of a flower. And I honestly cannot remember if this was before or after I met Phil, but it's his favorite flower. And it was like a central theme of our wedding. And I didn't even realize that until like a month before the wedding. I was looking at the flower on my board and I'm like, is that the flower? And it was. So use that vision board. Maybe we can do a whole episode on vision boarding. I know a expert in vision boarding. Okay, so those are simple daily practices that you can do for love manifestation. And then I wanted to cover 3 mindset shifts that you can implement today. Okay, so these are a few examples. And a lot of them relate to me. Again, this is my experience. So I want you, if this resonates with you, great. If not, throw it out the window. But think about your own mindset shifts. What are current negative, old, no longer needed beliefs, patterns, thought systems that do not align with what you are looking for anymore? And how can you shift them into what does align with what you're looking for? Really think about that. Journal it out if you need to, and start implementing those shifts. Now, some examples I have are to shift from needing to prove your worth to knowing your inherent worthiness. Realize that you are simply worthy of love just by existing, not because of what you do or accomplish. And this mindset shift involves really fully loving and embracing yourself, even the parts you're not proud of. This is the self-love, self-acceptance, self-forgiveness. So that's the first mindset shift. The second one that I have is move from searching to becoming a magnet. Okay? So this turning point happens when you stop so desperately seeking what it is you're looking for and instead start attracting. And for me, this mindset shift came from being willing to be alone forever instead of settling for less than what I deserved. So sometimes with manifesting, it really requires surrender and trusting the process. And yeah, you got to really accept the situation you're in if the alternative is not what you deserve. And then my last mindset shift is to trust your intuition over your anxiety. So this involves learning how to really recognize and honor that deep inner knowing that you already have. We all have intuition. Some of us are just better attuned to it than others, but it's something that you can become more and more attuned to. There are practices for this. I probably should cover this in another episode, but start to really pay attention to what your intuition is telling you, rather than all of the anxious, fear-driven thoughts. Your intuition is going to feel like a loving, supportive presence, even if it's telling you no. It feels different. Anxiety is just going to be all up here. I mean, for me, all up here in the chest. racing thoughts, obsessive thinking, all fear driven does not feel good. So those are my mindset shifts I would recommend implementing. And that's really all I have for all I have. I feel like I said a lot about manifesting a partner, but really it's just the first step is self-acceptance, self-love. Okay? Work on that. And then once you have that, start to imagine the ways that you want to feel in this relationship. Look for expanders, visualize, journal, but really tap into the feeling. And then take aligned action. That's all. You can do it. I actually seriously know that you can do it because I did it. And I know a lot of people who have done it. So I wish you all luck. If you haven't already manifested your partner and that's something that you want, then just know they're out there and you're on your way. You're on your way. Okay, well, I always end with what's making me cozy this week. And this week, I think it's really pretty simple. For the wedding, we got the pajamas. That's the thing you do, bridal pajamas and the bride's pajamas. But I ended up ordering actually just like really, really comfy pajamas, a matching set. And I have been wearing those every day. And yeah, that's what's making me cozy. I mean, there is nothing better than a good, comfy, luxurious pajama set. It actually inspired me to have a pajama party birthday. So that is what's making me cozy this week. On the next episode, I'm actually doing a Q&A with my partner that I manifested. So if you enjoyed this episode, we're going to be answering the same questions before we record and then telling each other live on the podcast what our answers are. And on that podcast, we talk a lot about the work we did on ourselves, what we were looking for in a partner, how we knew we were the one for each other, and how we've grown throughout the relationship. And there's a bunch that we cover in there. So if you want to actually hear about my relationship, that would be a good place to listen. So that should be out next week after this one. Okay. Well, thank you for listening. I'm going to link all of my socials, my blog, my website, all of that in there. I do holistic wellness and life coaching. So if that's something you're interested in, you can always book a free consultation with me. I will link that in the show notes. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, if you could please give me a review, a comment. It helps just get the word out about the podcast so other people can hear how to manifest their partner. I will link all of that in the show notes and follow me somewhere, and I will talk to you all next week. So stay cozy. Bye.